The halls of Stellar Academy buzzed with noise. Students from 100 worlds walked, slithered, or floated to their classes. Blue-skinned Oridians with their thick muscles stood tall next to the six-armed Meridians. Crystal-like Lumians glowed as they spoke in musical tones. Among them all, the few humans looked small and weak. "Did you hear? Another human is joining our class today," said Tak, a large Iridian male with scales that shimmered purple in the light. He laughed and flexed his arms. "I hope this one doesn't break as easily as the last one." His friends laughed. Humans were known for being soft, fragile, and slow. In a school that trained the galaxy's future soldiers and leaders, humans were seen as barely worth noticing. The classroom door slid open. Professor Han walked in, followed by a small figure. The new human was female, with black hair cut short and simple clothes that hung loose on her thin frame. Her eyes scanned the room quickly, noting exits, windows, and the position of each student. No one but Professor Han noticed this soldier-like behavior. "Class, meet Jia. She's our new student from Earth," said Professor Han. "Jia has transferred from the Sol System Academy. Please make her feel welcome." Jia bowed slightly, her face calm. "Thank you for having me," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear. Whispers filled the room. Earth was a backwater planet that had only joined the Galactic Union 50 years ago. Most species still saw humans as newcomers, barely out of their primitive stage. "Jia, please take a seat," Professor Han said, pointing to an empty desk between Tak and a gentle-looking insectoid named Sumi. As Jia walked to her seat, Tak stuck out his foot. It was a childish trick, but effective. Jia saw it coming. For a split second, her body tensed. Combat training screamed at her to counterattack. Instead, she stepped over his foot without comment and sat down. Tak frowned. Most humans would have tripped or at least looked scared. This one acted like she hadn't even noticed. "Today we'll study tactical approaches to multi-terrain combat," Professor Han said, bringing up a hologram of a battlefield. "In mixed-species units, understanding the strengths and weaknesses of your teammates is crucial." Jia watched quietly, taking mental notes. This was basic material she'd learned years ago. Material she'd used in real battles, not simulations. During a break in the lesson, Shuma turned to Jia. Her insect-like face couldn't smile, but her voice was kind. "Don't mind Tak. He treats all humans that way." "I don't mind," Jia said. It was true. After what she'd seen in the Nexus conflicts, a bully was nothing. Tak leaned over. "Hey, Earth girl. I heard humans can barely lift their own weight. Is that true?" Jia looked at him. For a moment, her eyes changed. The calm mask slipped, showing something hard and cold beneath, something that had seen death up close. Then it was gone. "Some of us are stronger than we look," she said simply. Professor Han's voice cut through the chatter. "Tomorrow we'll have combat simulations. You'll be paired against classmates of different species to test adaptation skills." He looked at his tablet. "Jia, you'll be paired with Tak." The room went silent. Then laughter broke out. A human against an Iridian. It would be a slaughter. Tak grinned, showing sharp teeth. "Try not to die, Earth girl." Jia nodded politely. "I'll do my best." As class ended, students filed out, already betting on how quickly Tak would win tomorrow. No one noticed how Jia moved, with the balanced grace of someone who knew exactly what her body could do. No one saw the small scars on her hands, the kind that came from real weapons, not training ones. Professor Han watched her leave. Unlike the students, he recognized a soldier when he saw one. And something told him tomorrow's class would be very interesting indeed. Jia sat alone in her small room as night fell over Stellar Academy. The lights of passing ships glowed through her window. She took out a small metal box from under her bed. Inside was a simple medal, the Solar Cross, the highest honor a human soldier could get. She closed her eyes, and the memories came back. 3 years ago, planet Nexus 7. the air filled with smoke and the sound of weapons fire. "Captain Jia, they've broken through the eastern line," a soldier shouted over the noise. Jia, dressed in battle-scarred armor, looked at the tactical display. The Void Collective forces were pushing forward. Her unit was trapped. "Move the wounded to the central bunker," she ordered. Squads 2 and 4 set up crossfire positions. A tall alien officer approached. "Captain, we should retreat. These positions cannot be held." "General Mok, if we retreat, the colony behind us falls," Jia said. 5,000 civilians. We hold." Jia picked up her rifle and turned to her mixed unit of humans and aliens. "We have one job: buy time for the evacuation ships. No one gets past us." For 16 hours, they held the line. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found Jia still standing, bleeding from 3 wounds, directing her remaining troops. Of the original 200 soldiers, only 37 survived. But behind them, all 5,000 civilians had escaped. That day, Jia became a legend. Jia opened her eyes and put the medal away. That was her past life. Now she had a new mission. After the Nexus conflicts ended, Earth's military leaders grew suspicious. Some believed there were Void Collective spies in the Galactic Union. They needed someone who could watch and report without being noticed. Who better than a human? A species everyone underestimated. Earth Command had given her orders. Attend Stellar Academy. Act like a normal student. Watch for anything unusual. Her real identity was classified at the highest level. A knock on her door broke her thoughts. "Come in," Jia said, quickly hiding the box. Sumi entered, her insect-like body moving gracefully. "I brought extra study materials for tomorrow's simulation," she said, placing a tablet on Jia's desk. "Tak is very strong, even for an Iridian." "Thank you," Jia said. "That's kind of you." Sumi's antenna twitched, her species' way of showing concern. "Most humans would be scared. You seem calm." Jia shrugged. "Worrying doesn't help." "You're different from other humans I've met," Sumi said. "Your eyes, they've seen things." For a moment, Jia considered telling Sumi the truth, but orders were orders. "Just tired from the transfer," she said instead. After Sumi left, Jia looked at the simulation data. Tak was indeed strong, even by Iridian standards. In a straight fight, a human would lose badly. But Jia had never fought straight fights. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling. The nightmares would come soon. They always did. Faces of those she couldn't save. The sounds of battle. The weight of command. While other students worried about tests and social status, Jia carried the memories of war. To them, combat was theory. To her, it was the thing that woke her screaming in the night. Tomorrow, she would have to be careful. Show enough skill to survive, but not so much that people would ask questions. Earth Command was clear. Her cover was more important than her pride. As sleep finally came, Jia's last thought was of her old unit. What would they think, seeing their captain pretend to be weak? They would understand. In war, deception was often the best weapon. And despite what her classmates thought, Jia was still a soldier at war. The combat arena was a large circular room with plain white walls. These walls could create any battle setting with advanced holograms. Today, they showed a rocky terrain with small hills and few places to hide. Students filled the viewing area above the arena. No one wanted to miss seeing the new human face Tak. 5 minutes until the match, announced Professor Han. Competitors, prepare yourselves. In the preparation room, Jia wore the standard training suit. It was too big for her human frame. Next to her, other students checked weapons and stretched. Across the room, Tak was showing off, lifting a heavy training weight with one hand. "Hey, human," he called. "Not too late to quit." Jia said nothing. She closed her eyes, controlling her breathing. Her mind worked on the problem. How to survive without revealing too much. Sumi approached nervously. I calculated your odds based on physical differences, she whispered. It's not good. Maybe Professor Han will stop it if. I'll be fine, Jia said softly. A bell rang. Time to begin. Jia walked into the arena. The simulated rocks felt real under her feet. Across from her, Tak entered to cheers from his friends. Combatants. Professor Han's voice came from speakers. This is a training exercise. First to 3 solid hits wins. Begin when the signal sounds. A red light flashed above them, then turned green. Tak didn't waste time. He charged forward, much faster than something his size should move. His first punch would have knocked out most humans. But Jia wasn't there anymore. She stepped aside with just enough space to avoid the blow. Years of combat had taught her economy of movement. Never move more than needed. Tak looked surprised but recovered quickly. He threw more punches, each missing by the smallest margin. The watching students grew quiet. They had expected a quick win. Instead, they saw a human moving just fast enough to avoid being hit. Stand still. Tak growled, growing angry. Jia remained silent, focused. Her military training screamed at her to counterattack. To use Tak's weight against him. To end this quickly. But that would raise questions she couldn't answer. 5 minutes passed. Tak hadn't landed a single hit. Sweat showed on his purple skin. Jia looked barely winded. This is impossible, someone in the crowd muttered. How is she doing that? Professor Han watched closely. His eyes narrowed. This was not the movement of a regular student. Tak roared in frustration and charged again. This time, Jia made a small miscalculation. His fist grazed her shoulder, not a solid hit, but enough to knock her off balance. For a moment, combat instinct took over. As she fell, Jia twisted, her legs sweeping out in a perfect move that caught Tak's ankle. The big Oridian crashed to the ground with a loud thud. The arena went completely silent. Jia stood up slowly, her face showing nothing. That move, it was military-grade combat training. A mistake. Tak rose, his eyes wide with shock and new respect. Where did you learn that? He asked. Basic self-defense on Earth, Jia lied. Lucky move. But her cover was slipping. Professor Han's expression showed he didn't believe her. And in the viewing area, a student named Da was recording everything. His analytical meridian mind already seeing patterns that didn't match a normal human student. The bell rang, ending the match. Neither competitor had scored the required 3 hits. Remarkable defensive strategy, Jia, Professor Han said. Class, note how she used minimal movement and her opponent's momentum against him. As students filed out, buzzing with talk of the surprising match, Day approached another student. Did you see that sweep technique? He whispered. I've only seen that in military combat vids. Something's not right about our new human classmate. Jia heard this as she passed. Her mission had just gotten more complicated. News of the match spread quickly through Stellar Academy. By dinner time, everyone had heard how the small human had fought Tak to a draw. Students looked at Jia differently now. Not with respect, exactly, but with curiosity. Jia sat alone in the dining hall, eating quickly. She needed to report this development to Earth Command. Her comm unit was secure, but she needed privacy. May I join you? Jia looked up to see Da, the Meridian student who had been watching her so closely. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of interest in his species. Of course, Jia said, keeping her voice neutral. Day sat down, his long fingers arranging his food carefully. That was impressive today, he said. Most humans can't avoid Oridian strikes so effectively. I got lucky, Jia said. Luck, Day repeated. Interesting. Did you know I study military history? That sweep move you used, it's remarkably similar to techniques taught to special forces. Jia's face remained calm, but her mind raced. Meridians were known for their intelligence and attention to detail. Da was dangerous to her mission. Earth has many fighting styles, she said. Some look similar to others by chance. Before Dai could respond, Tak approached their table. The large iridium looked uncomfortable. Human, he said to Ja. You fought well today. Coming from an iridian, this was high praise. Ja nodded politely. Thank you. You're very skilled. Tak seemed surprised by her response. He had expected anger or fear after his previous treatment of her. Perhaps we could train together sometime, he said awkwardly before walking away. You've made an impression, Dai observed. Not easy to do. After dinner, Jia headed to her room, but Professor Han's voice stopped her in the hallway. Jia, a word in my office, please. His tone left no room for refusal. Jia followed him to a small room filled with books and holographic displays of battle tactics. Professor Han closed the door. Your file says you transferred from Sol System Academy with basic training only. He pointed to a chair. Please, sit. Jia sat, keeping her posture relaxed despite her internal alert. However, Han continued, your performance today showed advanced combat awareness, training far beyond basic level. He leaned forward. Who are you really, Jia? For a long moment, Jia considered her options. Her orders were clear, maintain cover at all costs. But Professor Han could be a valuable ally, or a serious threat. My file contains all relevant information, Professor, she said carefully. Han studied her face. I served in the Nexus conflicts, you know. Joint Human Galactic Forces. I recognize combat veterans when I see them. He pointed to his own eyes. They have the same look you do. Jia remained silent. Han sighed. Listen carefully. There are rumors of Void Collective infiltrators in key positions throughout the Union, including educational institutions. He lowered his voice. Whatever your real mission is, you're not alone in your concerns. This was unexpected information. Could Han be a potential ally, or was this a trap? I'm just a student, Professor, Jia said. Han nodded slowly. Of course, but if this student ever needs assistance, my door is open. As Jia left his office, she noticed Dai down the hall, watching her. And behind him, another student quickly turned away when she looked in their direction. That night, Jia sent an encrypted message to Earth Command. Cover potentially compromised. Request instructions. The response came quickly. Maintain mission. Training expedition to Serenity 9 in 3 days. Intel suggests possible Void Collective activity there. Primary mission parameters unchanged. Jia deleted the message and looked out her window at the stars. Things were getting complicated. She would need to be more careful, or perhaps stop hiding what she really was. The training ship left Stellar Academy early in the morning. 20 students and 2 teachers sat inside, heading to Serenity 9. The small moon was known for its strange weather and rough terrain, perfect for survival training. Jia sat near the back, watching everyone. Professor Han was piloting the ship. The other teacher, Professor Min, explained the day's tasks. You will be divided into teams, Min said. Each team must reach the base camp by nightfall using only basic tools and maps. Day raised one of his 4 hands. What about the recent reports of unusual activity on Serenity 9? Just mining operations, Min answered quickly. Too quickly, Jia thought. She checked her small emergency pack. Inside, hidden under normal supplies, was a compact military knife and a communication device. Earth Command's warning about Void Collective activity had her on high alert. The ship entered Serenity 9's atmosphere. Through the windows, Jia could see thick purple clouds and rocky mountains. It looked peaceful enough. Then everything went wrong. A loud explosion rocked the ship. Warning lights flashed red. The ship tilted sharply to one side. We're hit, Professor Han shouted from the cockpit. Something fired at us. Students screamed as the ship spun out of control. Emergency oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. Professor Min was thrown across the cabin, hitting her head hard against a wall. Jia's training kicked in instantly. Everyone, Secure yourselves, she shouted, her voice cutting through the panic. Brace for impact. The ship crashed into the surface of Serenity 9 with a terrible sound of tearing metal. For a moment, everything was chaos. Smoke, sparks, and screaming. When it stopped, Jia was already moving. She checked Professor Min first, unconscious but alive. Professor Han was slumped over the controls, bleeding from a head wound. Is everyone okay? Jia called out, her voice now clearly that of a commander, not a student. Most students were dazed but not seriously hurt. Tak had protected 2 smaller students with his body. Xiumi was helping others with their oxygen masks. Day was staring at Jia with all 4 eyes wide open. The ship's communication system is destroyed, Day reported after checking. We can't call for help. Jia quickly assessed the situation. The ship was badly damaged. Smoke was filling the cabin. Outside, through the cracked windows, she could see movement in the rocks. We need to evacuate now, she ordered. Tak, help me with the emergency door. Together, they forced the jammed door open. Fresh air rushed in, along with the sound of We need to move away from the crash site, Jia whispered to the group. Those soldiers will search the area soon. The students looked at her with fear and confusion. Only minutes ago, they had been ordinary academy students. Now they were hiding from armed soldiers on a strange moon. Who are you really? Dai asked, his 4 eyes fixed on Jia. Later, she said firmly. First, we survive. Jia checked the injured professors. Professor Min was still unconscious. Professor Han was awake but too weak to walk. We need a stretcher for Professor Min, Jia said. Tak, can you carry Professor Han? The Iridian nodded, carefully lifting the injured teacher. Jia led the group away from the crash, staying low among the rocks. She moved with confidence, checking for tracks and keeping watch for patrols. The students followed in silent shock. After an hour of careful movement, they reached a small cave. We'll rest here, Jia decided. Set up a basic camp. As the students tended to the professors, Tak approached Jia. You know what you're doing, he said. It wasn't a question. Jia nodded. Yes. Military? Yes. Tak's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of respect in Iridian culture. I misjudged you. Inside the cave, Jia gathered everyone around. I need to tell you something, she began. I'm not just a transfer student. I was sent to Stellar Academy on a mission. The students stared at her. I'm Captain Jia of Earth Special Forces, she continued. I fought in the Nexus conflicts. Earth Command sent me to the Academy because we suspected Void Collective infiltration. A spy, Dai said, understanding now. An observer, Jia corrected. But that doesn't matter now. What matters is getting everyone safely off this moon. Xiumi raised a trembling hand. Why would the Void Collective attack students? That's what we need to find out, Jia said. But first, let me teach you some basic survival skills. Over the next few hours, Jia showed them how to move quietly, how to find water, how to read the terrain. The students listened carefully, their fear of her changing to respect. As night fell on Serenity 9, they sat around a small, hidden heat source. Jia kept watch near the cave entrance. Tell us about the war, Tak said suddenly. The real story, not what they teach at the academy. Jia was quiet for a moment. Then she began to speak. My first command was at New Seoul, she said softly. We were outnumbered 5-1. The Void forces surrounded the city. Evacuation ships were coming, but we needed to hold the line for 6 hours. The students listened, captivated. Humans aren't the strongest or fastest species, Jia continued. But we've learned to be survivors. We held for those 6 hours. Then 6 more. And 6 after that. Jia's eyes looked distant, seeing something far away. When reinforcements finally came, only 12 of us were still standing. But we saved over 10,000 civilians. The cave was silent except for the quiet hum of the heat source. They gave me a medal, Jia said. They called me a hero. But heroes just do what needs to be done when there's no other choice. Sumi moved closer to Jia. Is that why you have nightmares? Jia looked surprised. Our rooms are close, Sumi explained. I hear you at night sometimes. For the first time, the students saw vulnerability in Jia's eyes. War leaves marks, she said simply. Not all of them are visible. Before anyone could respond, Jia held up her hand for silence. Outside, she had heard something. The sound of boots on rocks. They found us, she whispered, her hand moving to her hidden knife. Everyone, prepare to move. Now we see if my lessons paid off. Move to the back of the cave, Jia whispered, quickly and quietly. The students carried the injured professors deeper into the darkness. Jia stayed near the entrance, listening. 3 soldiers were approaching. She could hear their footsteps and low voices. Scanner shows heat signatures inside, one said. Survivors from the ship, another asked. Must be. Command wants them alive. Especially the human. Jia's eyes narrowed. They were looking specifically for her, but how did they know she was here? Earth Command had kept her mission top secret. Someone had betrayed her. She slipped back to the group. We need another way out, she whispered. Day pointed to a narrow passage at the back of the cave. I can feel air movement from there. Good. Everyone through that passage, Jia ordered. I'll join you soon. Tak frowned. What are you going to do? Buy you time, Jia said, taking out her knife. And get some answers. Tak put his large hand on her shoulder. Not alone. For a moment, Jia wanted to argue, but she saw the determination in his eyes. The same look she had seen in fellow soldiers. She nodded. The rest of you go, she said. We'll catch up. As the others moved through the narrow passage, Jia quickly explained her plan to Tak. They gathered rocks and positioned themselves on either side of the cave entrance. The soldiers entered, weapons ready. Their black armor made them almost invisible in the dim light. Jia gave Tak the signal. They dropped the rocks, creating a distraction, then moved with silent speed. Jia struck first, disarming one soldier with a precise blow. Tak grabbed another, his Oridian strength crushing the soldier's weapon. The third soldier fired, but Jia was already moving, rolling under the shot to strike at his legs. In 30 seconds, it was over. 3 soldiers lay unconscious. That was. Tak struggled for words. I've never seen fighting like that. Tie them up, Jia said, already searching the soldiers for information. She found a datapad on one of them. The screen showed images of the academy students on the ship. One face was circled. Yil, a quiet student who rarely spoke to anyone. They're not after me, Jia realized. They want Yil. Why? Tak asked, finishing with the restraints. I don't know, but we need to find out. One of the soldiers was waking up. Jia knelt beside him, her knife visible. Why are you hunting Yil? She demanded. The soldier's eyes widened behind his cracked helmet visor. You're her, he whispered. The Butcher of Nexus 7. Jia flinched at the old enemy nickname. Answer the question, she said coldly. The boy carries valuable genetic information, the soldier said. His blood contains the key to new weapons. Jia and Tak exchanged looks. Yil was half Lumian, a species known for their unique biology. How many more of you are there? Jia asked. Enough to kill you all, the soldier sneered. Our commander has 20 elite hunters coming this moon. Jia stood up. Let's go. We need to warn the others. They moved through the passage, catching up with the group several minutes later. Everyone looked relieved to see them. We have a problem, Jia said. The Void Collective isn't after me. They're hunting Yil. All eyes turned to the skinny, silver-skinned boy who stood apart from the others. Me? Yil asked, his voice shaking. Why? Something in your Lumian DNA, Jia explained. And there are 20 hunters looking for you. Day stepped forward. I found something while you were gone. He pointed down a wider tunnel. This passage leads to an old mining facility. It might have communication equipment. Jia nodded. Then that's where we're going. But first, she looked at the frightened students. I'm going to teach you how to fight back. For the first time, Jia allowed herself a small smile. Time to show the hunters what it's like to be hunted. The abandoned mining facility stood in a small valley. Metal buildings, rusted by time, were scattered around a central structure. Years ago, miners had dug for valuable minerals here. Now, it would be their battlefield. Jia studied the area from a hidden position on a ridge. Behind her, the students waited. Over the past day, she had taught them basic combat and survival skills. They weren't soldiers, but they were no longer helpless. The main building should have communication equipment, Jia said, pointing. If we can send a distress signal, help will come. Day nodded. I can operate the equipment if we reach it. Jia looked at the group. Professor Han was now awake but weak. Professor Min still drifted in and out of consciousness. The students were tired and scared, but determined. Here's the plan, Jia said. We'll split into 3 teams. Tak, you'll lead the first team as a diversion on the east side. Suma, your team will protect the professors in that cave until we secure the facility. Day, you'll, and I will head for the communications room. Tak grinned, his sharp teeth showing. Give us some of those traps you taught us to make. Jia smiled slightly. A week ago, Tak had been her enemy. Now he was her most trusted ally. As night fell, they moved into position. Jia checked her makeshift weapons one last time. Then she gave the signal. Tak's team set off small explosions on the east side of the facility. Shouts followed as Void Collective soldiers ran toward the noise. Now Jia whispered to Dai and Yul. They ran toward the main building, keeping low. They'd reached the entrance without being seen. Inside, old mining equipment lay covered in dust. They moved deeper into the building, following signs to the control room. Almost there, Dai whispered, pointing to a door ahead. Suddenly, a voice spoke from the shadows. Captain Jia. At last. A tall figure stepped into view. He wore the black armor of the Void Collective, but his helmet was off, showing a face with pale green skin. Commander Vex, Jia said, recognizing the enemy leader from intelligence briefings. You're a long way from Nexus 7. I've waited a long time to meet the famous human captain, Vex said, his voice cold. The one who cost us victory. Run, Jia told Dai and Yul. Get to the control room. But, Yul started. Go, Jia ordered. The 2 students ran as Vex pulled out a weapon. The boy won't escape, Vex said. My soldiers are everywhere. You'll have to get through me first, Jia replied, raising her knife. Vex laughed. 1 human against me. You are brave but foolish. Their fight was brutal and quick. Vex was stronger, but Jia was faster. She dodged his attacks, looking for openings. He struck her twice, drawing blood. She wounded him once, but not seriously. You can't win, Vex said, advancing on her. Jia backed up, feeling the wall behind her. She was trapped. Then, unexpectedly, the wall panel beside her slid open. Yul stood there, his silver skin glowing faintly. This way, he shouted. Jia dove through the opening as Vex fired. The shot hit the wall where she had been standing. Yul led her through a maintenance tunnel to the control room. Dai was already there, working on the communication equipment. Almost got it, Dai said, his 4 hands moving quickly over the controls. A loud explosion shook the building. Through the window, Jia could see Void soldiers surrounding the facility. They found us, she said grimly. The communication panel suddenly lit up. Connection established, Dai announced. Before Jia could speak into it, the door burst open. Commander Vex stood there, weapon aimed at Yul. Step away from the boy, he ordered. Jia moved in front of Yul, shielding in with her body. No. Then you'll die together, Vex said, his finger tightening on the trigger. Jia tensed, ready to move. She might not survive, but she would give Yeol a chance to escape. This was what humans did. They protected others, no matter the cost. Time seemed to slow as Vex's finger tightened on the trigger. Jia calculated her options. None of them ended with her survival. But then, survival had never been her priority. The mission was what mattered. Just as Vex fired, something large crashed into him from behind. The shot went wide, hitting the ceiling. Tak stood in the doorway, breathing hard. "Sorry I'm late," the Iridian said. More shapes appeared behind him. The other students. They had abandoned their positions to help. Vex struggled to his feet, facing not one opponent but a dozen determined students. They held makeshift weapons and stood with new confidence. "Surrender," Jia said to Vex. "You're outnumbered." The commander laughed. "My soldiers will be here in moments. You've lost." A new voice came from the communication panel. "This is Union Battlecruiser Dauntless. We receive your distress signal. Help is on the way." Vex's face showed shock, then anger. He raised his weapon again. Jia moved faster than anyone thought possible. Her knife flashed, striking Vex's hand. His weapon clattered to the floor. Outside, the sound of large ships filled the air. Union forces had arrived. "It's over," Jia told Vex. The next few hours passed in a blur. Union soldiers secured the facility and arrested the Void Collective Forces. Medical teams treated the injured. Yeol was placed under special protection once they understood why he had been targeted. As they prepared to leave Serenity 9, Tak approached Jia. "You could have escaped on your own," he said. "Why risk everything for us?" Jia looked at the students who had become her team, her responsibility. "That's not what humans do. We don't leave people behind." 3 days later, they returned to Stellar Academy. The story of what happened on Serenity 9 had spread throughout the school. Students lined the halls as Jia walked to the headmaster's office, whispers following her. "Is it true she fought Commander Vex? I heard she taught the others how to fight. They say she's a war hero." The headmaster was waiting with a Union military officer. On a desk between them sat a file, Jia's real file, with all its classified missions and commendations. "Captain Jia," the officer said formally, "your cover is no longer necessary. The Void Collective infiltration has been exposed, thanks to you and your students." The headmaster looked at Jia with new respect. "We had no idea who you really were." Jia stood straight, her posture now openly military. "Sir, I request permission to complete my studies here. My mission may be over, but I still have much to learn." The officer smiled. "Permission granted, Captain." Word spread quickly. By evening, everyone knew the truth. Jia was not just any human. She was Captain Jia, the hero of New Seoul, holder of the Solar Cross, veteran of 17 major battles. In the dining hall that night, Jia entered to find the room fall silent. Then Tak stood up and began pounding his fist on the table, an Iridian sign of highest respect. One by one, other students joined in. Sumi approached with a small package. "From all of us," she said, her insect features somehow managing to look shy. Inside was a new uniform jacket, sized for a human but bearing the marks of a Union officer. On the collar was a small pin shaped like Earth. "So you remember who you are," Sumi explained. "To us, you're not just a human anymore. You're our friend, our teacher." Day stepped forward. "The Academy has approved a new class," he announced. "Human combat techniques, taught by you, if you're willing." Jia looked around at the faces watching her. Aliens of all species, who once saw humans as weak, now looked at her with respect. "I'd be honored," she said. And so the legend of Captain Jia grew. On the battlefield, she had been a hero. But at Stellar Academy, she became something more. A bridge between species, teaching others that true strength came in many forms. Some still called humans fragile, but now they said it with respect.